Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, complaining, job interviewing, all the everyday things you do in your native language in your country of origin, but in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. You can also, if you're joining us live on Zoom, write to us in the chat here in the menu box with any questions, comments, concerns, or requests you have. You can also see all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You'll see all of our previous lessons, including the last 60 or 70 or so with the attached vocabulary sheets we always use. And you can also leave us comments there. It does great. It gets more people to know about Cafe Oleh when you do that. So thank you in advance. This is also our last week of our summer session. Next week begins our fall. If you have not yet gotten a chance to register via the link sent to you by Nefesh B'Nefesh on email, do so. If you didn't get the email, you didn't get the link, you don't know about Cafe Oleh or Nefesh B'Nefesh up until this point, go to our website, nbn.org.il. Find Cafe Oleh. You'll see a registration link for the upcoming fall. And lastly, next week is the resumption, the return, as it will, of Cafe Oleh Conversations. This meets same time on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. local time, where we take the most recent or past lessons that we've done on Monday nights, turn them into conversation starters. So you'll be broken down into smaller groups based on your current proficiency level and giving conversation prompts to really practice what existing Hebrew you have using the everyday topics we cover here on Mondays. So with that, let's get started on today's lesson. It's actually not only a review, but it also comes as a request, and it's to talk about something that for a lot of Hebrew learners is very challenging, which once you get the hang of it, it's really not challenging. You just have to get used to using a word that doesn't mean anything. And that's very odd in a language and a culture that goes with it of being as expressive as Hebrew can be. Hebrew doesn't have a lot of vocabulary words. We've talked about this before. It has about 35 to 40,000 individual words, and then double that when you consider compound nouns, right? For example, Bait means house, Sefer means book, Beit Sefer, putting those two together in a compound noun becomes a school, the house of the book, right? So around 80,000 altogether. That's a very small amount, certainly in comparison to English. And one of the things that's important when you're constructing sentences is this word that doesn't mean anything. And the word we're talking about is et. Et is an article. Aleph, taf, et. Et is best understood as an article which is always followed by a direct object. What is a direct object? Let's do some review and see where et pops up. Okay. Let me just pull this up so we can view slideshow. Should it let me? Great. Okay. Very simple sentence in Hebrew. Hayeled kana et ha'uga. Okay. The boy bought the cake. In this sentence, as you see color-coded here so you can follow along really easily, Hayeled, the boy in Hebrew, is the subject. The subject in Hebrew is called noseh. Okay? The verb is kana. He bought, past tense. Bought is in the red, right? In Hebrew, the poal, the verb. And then it's et ha'uga. So the sentence is telling us The boy didn't just buy any cake, he bought the cake. We don't have any other descriptors yet. We don't have any other details, but we know he bought the cake. It's a direct object because of that et. And et, because it's followed by the direct object, you need the prefix ha. Ha simply means the. Okay. The boy bought the cake. You notice in the sentence, et doesn't have a meaning because et does not have a meaning. It is an article used before a direct object. This is going to be really important when we look at a few other sentences in a second that play with the word order. We've had a previous lesson, which this comes from, on word order in modern Hebrew. Word order in modern Hebrew is actually quite easy to do. I see the chat is disabled. Sorry, folks. Let me just take care of that. Okay, the chat is now on. Just please keep it to relevant things regarding class. But yes, the chat is on. Okay. Et tells you that whatever follows et is the direct object. So you know there's talking about something specific. What if it was an indirect object? What would that sentence look like? Hayeled kana uga. Or not even an indirect object, it's simply an object. We're going to get to indirect in a little bit. Hayeled kana uga. The boy bought a cake. It's not the cake. It's not this cake or that cake. It's not the pretty cake. It's not the delicious cake. It's not the big cake. It's simply a cake. In that case, there is an object, but it's not direct. Okay? Hayeled kana uga. Listen to how I say it. Hayeled kana uga. The boy bought a cake. In that case, the object uga is not a direct object and therefore does not get et before it. In this sentence, subject, verb, object, which is the vast majority of sentences in modern Hebrew, just like in English, the boy bought the cake. Hayeled kana et hauga. From there, I can be more descriptive. Hayeled kana et hauga hagdola. The boy bought the big cake. Hayeled kana et ugat hayom huledet. The boy bought the birthday cake, right? In that case, I'm actually putting a compound noun at the end of it, but it's still a direct object because we're not just talking about any cake, we're talking about the birthday cake. Okay? I could also say Hayeled kana ugat yom huledet. The boy bought a birthday cake. That's not, there's no direct object. We don't know which birthday cake. We just know it was a birthday cake. Okay. Et, it precedes a direct object. You have to use et. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know that goes against learning words that you don't understand, that don't have meanings. Okay. But it's a direct and definite object. We know what this is. Okay. Hayeled kana et hauga, a direct and definite object. Hayeled kana uga, an object, indefinite. Let's look at some more sample sentences here. In Hebrew, like I said, especially in modern Hebrew, you can play around with the sentence structure. So for example, here you have et hauga hayeled kana, or et hauga kana hayeled. This isn't always found. This is usually found in more literature, or in sentences where the object is really trying to be emphasized. Et hauga hayeled kana. It's the cake that the boy bought, right? In English, the cake the boy bought. But in English, we don't have the clues to tell us what's the object, what's the subject. In this case, we do, because et is always followed by the definite direct object. And hayeled still remains the subject. Okay. What I want to do now, and if you have questions, by the way, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat, is I want to look at another very important aspect of answering this question about et. And when we talk about objects, and it goes back to a previous lesson we had about prepositions. So let me just pull that up. Just a second. Here it is. Pull that up. There we go. We've talked about this before, not just in terms of prepositions and conjunctions, but in the back of many dictionaries. For modern Hebrew, there's a table of pronouns, excuse me, not just of pronouns, but also prepositions, conjunctions, and how they're, for lack of a better term, conjugated. What do I mean by conjugated? Let's first just take the subject pronoun. Subject pronoun is just the pronoun that we use for the subject. For example, I, ani, you, masculine, ata, you, feminine, at, and so forth, right? This is what we call the subject pronoun in Hebrew. Right? If, let's say, we don't have a name, right? So instead of saying Tomer, we say who, right? Just like in English. If we don't have the name of someone, we say he. That is the subject. I, you, he, she, we, you, they, and they. Okay? That's this line. This is what we're talking about tonight, right? Et. Et is able to be conjugated because, for example, what if we didn't know what the boy bought? Or let's say we've been talking about the cake as the direct object for a long, long time, right? And we need to change up our language, or it's just getting boring, or whatever it might be, okay? What if we want to say the boy bought it, right? Just like in English, you can say after days of deliberating which cake to buy, the boy bought it, right? In Hebrew, that is a direct object, it, okay? It, in this case, would be, because it's uga, it's feminine, would be ota, right? So if I want to say the boy bought it, hayeled kana ota. The boy bought it, okay? Control B. The boy bought it. I can do all sorts of sentences like this where I don't specify, at least for the sake of that sentence, what the actual object is. Instead, it's a pronoun. It's something that's taking the place of the noun. If I wanted to say, for example, I see you. Ani ro'eh otcha, masculine. Oh, there's a T at the beginning. Let's get rid of that. Okay, otcha, masculine, or otach, feminine, as you see up here, means you, but not you as in the subject, but you as the object. I see you. And because that action is a direct, what I'm seeing you is a direct object and a definite object, it's therefore otcha or otach, right, depending on gender. But the point is, I see you. That's these verbs, these pronouns, excuse me. And that's why they're also translated differently. Ani, right, as the subject is I. Oti, as the direct object and definite object at that, is me. Okay, that's the difference. If you want to say, you see me, you is the subject, me is the object, right? In which case, ata, you, masculine singular, ro'eh, see, oti, me. Okay, what's the subject? What's the object? Will then determine which of these you're using. Subject, ani, ata, at, hu, he, and so forth. Direct object pronoun, you can consider the best way as the conjugation of the word et. Oti is me, otcha, you, masculine, singular, otach, you, feminine, singular, oto, him, or it. Remember that everything is gendered in Hebrew. Ota, her, it. Otanu, us. Etchem, you plural. Etchen, you plural feminine. Otam, then. Otan, them feminine. Okay. This is a big step up, especially for many of you in this class who are at a beginner's level, between the subject and the object. Just like in English, I is not the same thing as me. We don't say me sees you. That's incorrect English. Same thing in Hebrew. You cannot get away with the equivalent of me sees you in Hebrew for a very long time. You need to learn, and just as you are right now, the difference between a subject and object, and thus I see you, ani ro'eh otcha. Okay, I see you. Okay, let's do another example, and then I want to move on to other forms of this, or what's considered an indirect object. Okay, let's say, let's give another simple sentence here. How about אנחנו פוגשים אותם. Right? אנחנו, over here, we, okay, the subject, also because it's not just the first word, but אנחנו is inherently a subject. Pogshim, pogshim is meet, present tense, so we meet or we are meeting. Otam, them. Okay, we meet them or we are meeting them. It means the same thing in Hebrew. Anachnu pogshim otam, we meet them, we are meeting them. Okay, so you get the understanding here. The direct object is simply et, conjugated, for lack of a better term. Oti, otcha, otach, oto, ota, otanu, etchem, etchen, otam, otan. Let's get to examples, a few, not a lot, of some other of these conjugations that talk about indirect objects. So for example, all of these, and these are, if the direct object is important, and I know this is a little cerebral and a little grammatical, and the terms, as much as I try as hard as possible to talk about English grammar and Hebrew grammatical terms, I know it's confusing for people. We don't normally use these. I'm trying to focus in terms of the difference between direct and indirect in this case. We talked about oti, otra, otach. What if I want to say, I'm speaking to you, or I'm telling you something? In Hebrew, this form actually gets used a lot. It comes from the prefix pronoun le, and just like et was conjugated, so too does this. Li means to or for me, right? We talked about this in prepositions and conjugations a few weeks ago. Lecha is to you or for you. Lach, to you, for you, feminine. Lo is to or for him, and so forth. Okay, this one actually gets used a lot. So for example, in the sentence, אני רוצה לספר לו משהו, in Hebrew actually, אני רוצה לספר לו משהו. Okay. One of the things you're going to learn very fast in Hebrew is that it's not enough to learn how to conjugate a verb. You need to know what preposition comes with it. In this case, the verb is lesaper. Lesaper or lesaper or lesaper, however you want to say it, in Hebrew, means to tell. Okay. However, just like in other languages, to tell in Hebrew takes the indirect object, literally to tell to me or to tell to someone, just like you would say to English. I told the story to him. That gets confusing in English because we can also say, I'm telling him the story. I'm telling him the story belies the fact that I'm telling to him something, or I'm telling the story to him. And that's an important distinction in Hebrew. Ani rotze lesaper lo mashu. I want to tell him something. But in Hebrew, it's not how we say it in English. In English, what did I just say? I want to tell him something. In Hebrew, it's I want to tell to him something. And you're going to hear native Israelis literally translate often many things, and this is one of them. But they're correct, because in Hebrew, like a lot of other languages, by the way, the verb to tell takes the indirect object afterwards. Okay, so for example, ani רוצה לספר לו משהו. By the way, this comes up in a lot of other places, and this is why this indirect object pronoun is so important in Hebrew. For example, you're going to hear this. תפתח לי את הדלת, בבקשה. תפתח לי את הדלת, בבקשה. Open the door for me. Right? That case, we're translating in just the way we would in English, but look at where it's not only what we're using, but also our friend comes back. Tiftach is the command form of open. So open, li, for me, et, right? It's not just open for me, it's open for me the door. Open the door for me. Tiftach li et hadelet bevakasha. That's how you're going to say it. Open the door for me, please. Right? In English, we would not say, open for me the door, please. We would say, open the door for me. In Hebrew, tiftach li et hadelet is what you're going to hear increasingly in spoken, conversational, and even in written Hebrew. Tiftach li et hadelet vakasha. That li becomes, you're going to see a lot. For example, tiftach li et hadelet vakasha. Open for me the door, please. Open the door for me. Et is important because it's not just opening anything, it's opening the specific door. In the context we're in, it's clear I need to get somewhere. Open the door for me, please. How would you say, for example, let's think of another one where we use li or any of these other direct objects a lot. There's a great slang expression we've talked about before. Yatsa le. Yatsa is the verb to leave, to go out, but it also in slang means to become. So if you call someone, if you say to someone, Yatsa lecha tzaddik, right? You've become a tzaddik. You've become a good person, righteous person. But in Hebrew, you can simply call someone a tzaddik. It's a good person. Yatsa lecha tzaddik. You did something good. You've become a good person, a righteous person, right? But this is slang, literally meaning became to you a tzaddik. This lecha or li or any of these indirect objects, you're going to hear a lot in modern Hebrew. To list all the examples here would still run short of what we're going to hear all the time. Okay, yatsa lecha tzaddik, tiftach li et hadelet vaksha. Another one that also works in other languages as well. אפשר לשלוח לי את הסיסמה וואי. אפשר לשלוח לי את הסיסמה לווי-פיי? Can you send me the password for the Wi-Fi? And obviously very important one if you're working in a new place or you're at someone's home, whatever it could be. Efshar, is it possible, or would you or could you? Lishloach is to send. Li, right? Now in English, we simply say, could you send me the password for the Wi-Fi? In Hebrew, like other languages, it's indirect. Could you send it to me? Right? אפשר לשלוח לי, could you send me the password for the Wi-Fi? And again, our friend et appears yet again here. You have to use the et. I can't stress it enough, and that's why it's coming up in the examples here. אפשר לשלוח לי את הסיסמה לווי-פיי? Could you send me the password for the Wi-Fi, right? It's not just any password. word is a very specific thing, and that look possession is a pretty straightforward one, literally of mine or my, yours, and theirs. It's also very tricky because you're not used to thinking about this necessarily, or you're not learning it, what I would say, early enough, which is another of these object pronouns. In this case, it's with. With in modern Hebrew is im, ein mem. Okay. And ein mem, sorry, ein mem. In modern Hebrew, however, when we conjugate it, just like we did with et, became oti, otra, otach, and so forth. Im, the base becomes it. I know in biblical Hebrew and in stays the same. But I don't want to confuse you here. We're only learning modern Hebrew. In modern, if you say with me, is who רוצה לפגוש איתי. He wants to meet with me. Okay, you have to use, again, just like with oti, you could say he wants to meet me. There's obviously a difference in meaning, just like in English, he wants to meet me versus he wants to meet with me. He wants to meet with me, הוא רוצה לפגוש איתי, with me. Okay, and so forth. איתי, with me, איתך, איתך, איתו, איתה, איתנו, איתכם, איתכן, איתם, איתן. Why am I speeding it? Because look at all of these. For example, let's just take the first person singular, ani. Listen to these words very carefully. Ani, subject pronoun. Oti, direct object. Li, indirect object. Sheli, my, possession. Iti, with me. Your trick with all of these is going to recognize that the endings almost always stay the same. So for example, me, just like ani ends with the e sound, so too do all of its other forms. Oti, iti, li, and so forth. Another one that does that, for example, is anachnu, right? First person plural, we. Anachnu, we. Otanu, us. Lanu, to us or for us. Shelanu, ours. Itanu, with us. Okay, that ending is going to be a key for you to remember what the word means, first of all, but also to construct it from the get-go. Right? We're going to send you this table. It's a table that you'll find in many Hebrew learning books as well as in dictionaries, but it's important to have now that we understand when we talk about objects and subjects and indirect versus direct and definite and indefinite, you understand all the different meanings here. Okay. I want to stop here because we see I have a bunch of questions. This is a bit heavier than I normally like to do when we talk about grammar, but it was a request to go over et. The very quick way, and I could have said this at the beginning, is you have to use et. You cannot get away from using et. It has to be at the beginning of, it has to be in the sentence preceding a direct object, indefinite object. Okay, let me get to some questions here. Modify cake, say chocolate cake. Does that not make it a direct object? The boy bought a chocolate cake. No, it would still be hayeled. Let me write it here. Hayeled kana ugat chocolate. Right? Hayeled kana ugat chocolate. The boy bought a chocolate cake. When it becomes the chocolate cake, then yes, you have to use et. Definite and direct. Hayeled kana et ugat chocolate. But until then, it's simply הילד קנה עוגת chocolate. The boy bought a chocolate cake. Okay, so just describe that. Someone asking about chocolate cake. If you are, by the way, I see a bunch of people asking about the link for Cafe Oleh. If you are registered for this, you are receiving our emails and therefore you are getting the link for it. If not, stay tuned, check your inboxes. You will be getting another link. Otherwise, I will send you, no, we will send it to you. There's a lot of you and just me on the call. We will send you the link again, but just go to, you can even type in Google search, folks. It also works wonders. Cafe Oleh Nefesh Benefesh, and you'll see our landing page. Do you have any hints on how to determine gender in Hebrew? I get the rules for modifying verbs, but no idea of what gender a noun is. We have a whole previous lesson on gender and how to recognize it, exceptions to the rule, and so forth. Highly recommend visiting our YouTube link. There are some held fast rules that basically words that end with taf, like an et sound, or a hey with an ah sound, are feminine. But again, we have a previous class that goes over that. Great question. Yes, we will include the vowels when we send out this table to you, so you get the difference between otcha and otach and so forth and how to pronounce it. How would you say in Hebrew, would you help me now? I usually hear people say Israeli, but shouldn't you use oti? No. So the verb, we talked about verbs that use certain prepositions over others. אפשר לעזור. What's unfortunate here is that some of these make a lot of sense and some of them you're just going to have to guess. In this case, אפשר לעזור לי, can you help me? In English, we say, can you help me? To help someone is a direct, definite, the someone is a direct, definite object. In Hebrew, it's not, right? אפשר לעזור לי. I help to someone. I help for someone. Okay, that's the literal translation, but it's just best to understand when you learn a verb. And in fact, really good dictionaries will have next to the verb and perhaps some of its conjugations, it'll have the preposition that follows it, right? So for example, la'azor, the verb for to help, is followed by the preposition le. אפשר לעזור לי? Could you help me, please? The please is implied, by the way, because it's efshal, polite. We've gone over that before. Great question. I've noticed Israelis using et when it is wrong, as in yeshli et sefer. But that, so it says it's because Israelis are influenced by English and European languages, where I have the book, makes the word book a direct object. So I have the book. We don't have enough context here. What if it's a very specific book? If it's a definite direct object, then yes, it has to be yeshli et hasefer. It absolutely needs to be there. So that doesn't quite work without context. Yeshli et hasefer. I have a very specific book, definite direct object. That is correct. There are sentences where it can be yeshli hasefer, meaning I have the book in question, as in I don't own the specific book, but I maybe have the same title somewhere. I need more context, in other words, to answer that. But yes, yeshli et hasefer is a perfectly all right sentence in modern Hebrew. Tiftach bishvili et hadelet. Again, it's not about what's wrong or what's right. It's what you're going to hear in modern Hebrew. So the original sentence here was Tiftach li et hadelet. Oh, if it's not going to let me, come on. Tiftach li et hadelet, bevakasha. Right? You will hear people say tiftach bishvili et hadelet. It's a little bit more formal. Bishvil is not wrong, but it's more about what you're going to hear. Because remember, here at Cafe Oleh, we talk about everyday Hebrew. And everyday Hebrew is not just what you're going to use, it's also what you're going to hear. Tiftach li et hadelet vakasha is going to make sense for two reasons. One, because many Israelis will say this. Actually, three reasons. Two, li, the prepositional prefix le, can mean two or four. So it means the same thing. And three, and most important that I know many in formal Hebrew don't teach, is what we've talked about before, aesthetics in Hebrew. In aesthetics, the aesthetics in Hebrew are as follows. The fewer the words, the fewer the letters, the fewer the syllables to express the same thing, the better. Bishvili, three syllables. Li is only one syllable. Whenever you have a choice of words that mean the exact same thing and provide the exact same meaning to the listener, and there are fewer syllables or letters involved, that option will always win. So tiftach li et hadelet vaksha is used all the time because Israelis and modern Hebrew prefer short, concise sentences and words, not long words. No one has the time. Think about all the stereotypes you may have of Israelis. No one has the time to say tiftach bishvili et hadelet vaksha. That's two extra, syllables as opposed to tiftach li et hadelet vaksha. Faster, more right to the point. So it's not that you're wrong with the word choice. There's the cultural and social context that's missing. Great question. If et is the conjugation of im, why isn't it? That's just what it is. This is one of those you're going to have to learn it because that's what it is. Okay? With me, when conjugated, goes from im to iti, itra, itach, ito, ita, and so forth. Wish I had a better answer for you. What is the difference between et and imi? Modern Hebrew versus older Hebrew, biblical and otherwise. And we're talking only in this class about modern Hebrew, folks. Modern Hebrew, et means with me. Have to learn this group only. Iti, itra, itach, ito, ita, itanu, and so forth. Okay. Oh, sorry, my WhatsApp is still sending messages. It shouldn't. Is a valid conjuga instead of etauga? This is a great question. So I just went on a little bit of a rant about how fewer syllables and fewer letters, the better in modern Hebrew. You can take it a step further. Let's do the same sentence. Okay, tiftach li et hadelet bevakasha. In modern Hebrew, especially when it's spoken, and it's spoken fast and it's spoken with what we call eliding sounds. Many languages have eliding sounds. One of the ones that's most well known for that is Brazilian Portuguese. A lot of eliding sounds. You don't know when one word begins and the other one ends. Hebrew can do that as well. And think of it like a contraction in Hebrew, in English, where instead of saying tiftach li et hadelet vaksha, you're going to say the following. And this is how it's going to be spelled. This is both slang, but this is more a reflection on how people actually talk. Instead of saying tiftach li et hadelet vaksha, they're going to say the following. Tiftach li tadelet vaksha. They combine the et with the ha on the delet to make et ha turn into ta. Ta. And we've talked about this before in slang. This is a very important one. Tiftach li tadelet vaksha. You aren't expected to speak like this. This is not just, I'm not going to say it's slang. It's someone who's very comfortable in modern Hebrew speaking. not just fluent, but comfortable speaking, will know automatically, especially when it's an emotional thing. They're fired up about something. They want to be very clear how emphatic they are about a certain topic. They're going to elide et and ha into ta. And ta has to be a very implosive ta. So tiftach li tadelet vaksha. Okay, you don't have to speak like this. You can say tiftach li et tadelet vaksha, and even though it technically saves you one syllable, this is still the reigning champion in modern Hebrew. If you want to be a little bit more forceful, a little bit more emotional in your language, you're going to elide that et and ha into a ta sound. Great question. What is the difference between uga and ugat? Great question as well. So as we've talked about before, and I said at the beginning of this class, Hebrew has about 35 to 40,000 individual words, unique words, and another same amount that are compound nouns. Compound nouns is when you put together two nouns to create a new word. For example, in Hebrew, chocolate cake. Chocolate in Hebrew is not considered an adjective like it may and could be in English. It's considered a noun, chocolate. So if you want to say a chocolate cake, you cannot say cake, the word cake and chocolate together as if it's a noun and adjective like you would in English. You have to say a cake of chocolate. And the way you do that, instead of using the article shell of all the time, is that you combine the two nouns, cake of chocolate, uga chocolade. And one of the rules in doing this is that when the first word ends in a hey, it turns into a taf. Ugat chocolade. Okay. You could say uga shel chocolade, a cake of chocolate, but the way you'll hear it most often is ugat chocolade. The hey turns into a taf because it's the first word in the order, and it's making it clear these words are not only connected, but they are forming a new concept altogether. It's not just a cake, it's a chocolate cake. Anyone who eats chocolate cake knows that is a very different cake from other cakes, whether you like it or not. Ugat chocolade. Great. Another great expression someone just added in the list. I'm going to add it here so you can see it. I love this expression. Ta'aseli tova. Ta'aseli tova is the equivalent in English of do me a favor. But not do me a favor in the way you're asking someone to do something, but it's like, do me a favor, right? That tone indicates all sorts of things. It could mean an actual favor, a physical one, or something nice, right? Do me a favor and close the window blinds, please. But it could also be, do me a favor and shut up, right? Do me a favor and leave me alone. Or it could be, taseli tova, give me a break, is the other way that we translate taseli tova. Give me a oh, didn't like that. Give me a break. Now tasili tova, I did the female version, but let's stick with the female male. Sorry. Taseli tova. La'asot means to do or to make. This is in the future tense and the command form. So taseli tova, do me a favor, right? In English, do me a favor, make me an offer, right? The verbs do and make in English, again, get a what we would call the direct definite object in Hebrew. In English, in Hebrew, though, it's not. It's li. This is why it's important when you learn new verbs, whether it's with me here at Cafe Oleh or in any other place you learn, Ulpan, high school, university, private tutors, you need to ask what the preposition is that goes with that verb. In this case, la'asot is almost always followed by the prepositional prefix le. And that's why it's taseli tova, do me a favor, or the better translation, give me a break. Okay. Do you preface efshar with im, or is that too formal? It is way too formal. Drop ha'im, you will rarely use it unless you're really trying to emphasize something. It is unfortunately one of the things that people have to unlearn when they learn Hebrew in many contexts. Ha'im is rarely used in modern Hebrew and everyday Hebrew for sure. When to use bevakasha or na, we'll come back to that at another lesson. Great question. Ugat chocolate is indeed an example of smichut. Smichut is simply a compound noun in Hebrew. I'm just using the English, but yes, it's the same thing as smichut. How would you say shut up? We have a lot of different ways to say shut up. If you want to use what we've been talking about today, and it's one of my, we're going to incorporate a couple different things we learned in class today to say to a man or to a male, shut up. Stom tape. This is not sheket. This is not shtuk or any of the other things you've learned. This is a much more forceful way for someone to say, literally close your mouth, seal your mouth. Listom etape means to shut one's mouth. But we're using it as shut up as a command. So the verb gets in its imperative form. And we had a few weeks ago a class all about imperatives. And then we're going to do that eliding thing. Instead of saying stom etape, we're going to say stom tape. First off, listen to how that sounds with all those implosive sounds. Stom tape. If you're screaming at someone and you yell stom tape, it's clear you are angry and you are forcing them to do something, or you want them to do something. Okay, stom tape is a great way to say shut up. It is very forceful. But when you're telling someone to shut up, own it in being forceful. Okay. All right. Finally, do you say glidat chocolate for chocolate ice cream? Yes. Chocolate, again, is not the word chocolate is a noun, not an adjective. So if you want to say chocolate ice cream, glidat chocolate. The glida turns into glidat chocolate. I know that was a lot of grammar. Take a deep breath. You're going to review this. You're going to get the vowels. You're going to get some more sample sentences in the spreadsheet that goes out. And next week, we're going to get as far away from grammar, at least on surface, as possible. Next week, per request, we're not only starting our fall session, but we're going to be talking about public transportation in Israel. More importantly, not just the modes, but how to pay for it. We have a very revolutionary, there's been a revolution in the last few years in how to pay for public transportation that if you haven't been to Israel in a very long time, you're probably not used to. It's a lot more, how shall we say, civilized and a lot easier, but you still need to know how to do it. And we're going to also go through the vocabulary you need to make sure not only are you paying the right fare and you're not going to get a ticket or be fined if you're found to have not paid the right thing, but also how to score some deals, because deals are really important anytime, but especially in Israel. With that, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. You'll get a copy of this lesson and the spreadsheet that goes with it in the next day or two. And stay tuned in your email for links to the fall session starting next week, as well as the return of Cafe Oleh Conversations, which comes next week. We're going to try to send you also the topics for both Monday and Wednesday classes as early as possible. So definitely stay tuned to your email. If not, find us on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website. If you can't find it on the website, folks, there's a reason why that menu bar is at the top of your browser. Type in Cafe Oleh Nefesh B'Nefesh or Nefesh B'Nefesh Cafe Oleh. I promise you'll get to us and you'll get to the registration link. Until then, toda rabah. See you all very soon and lehitraot.